Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for this IELTS lesson. Today, we're going to take a look at the matching sentence endings. You're probably familiar with this question type because it requires its test takers to complete sentences. And students usually despise this type of question because they notice a lot of options and they see that the options are quite long. If you take a look here on the left-hand side, you see that there's a lot to read through. And this question type will ask you to locate precise information in the passage. And you'll have to make sure that your answers are also grammatically correct because you'll have to match these endings in the table to these statements. So in general, students find this a bit troublesome because they have to think of grammar, they have to locate specific information, and there are usually more endings than questions. So overall, this tends to be one of the more difficult questions for students. But don't worry, today I'm going to take you through a step-by-step example and we'll see how proper preparation, scanning and skimming reading techniques, which we'll talk about later, will help you tackle this question type. We'll go through it together. I'll give you all the skills you need, and I hope that you'll feel more confident at the end of this video and ready to do some more practice. First off, before we get into our step-by-step guide, I just want to explain a little bit about the matching sentence ending question type. Like I said earlier, you'll have to match the ending of these sentences, which will be your questions, and the endings will come in a box, usually with letters. Today we have letters A through E, but it could also be common to see letters ranging from A to G. So there are usually more endings than there are questions. And basically you'll just have to choose the correct ending based on the information in the passage. You will not be able to repeat endings as answers, so that is one good thing about this question type. For example, if 38 is A, we could immediately cross off A so as not to confuse us for the rest of the questions. Like I said earlier, the grammar will also be important to look at because if one of these endings doesn't make sense for one of these questions, it's probably incorrect. This scares students a little bit because they feel as though they have to have perfect grammar. And I would say otherwise. It can actually help you. So if you have great grammar and you notice that an option wouldn't work with the statement because of the grammar, you can eliminate it. However, the more difficult passages will contain endings that make grammatical sense in mostly all of the options. However, in our step-by-step example, we'll take a look at the grammar here as well. And then probably the most difficult thing about this matched sentence ending question type is that the answers do not necessarily present themselves in order. So number 40 could be at the beginning of the passage, number 38 could be at the end of the passage. So we'll really have to rely on building up our scanning techniques to find the answers quickly and to not waste any time reading unnecessary parts of the text. All right, I hope you're ready to follow along with me and become a matching sentence ending pro. Now, before we get started with our step-by-step example, I just want to make sure you have a nice guide about where we're going and how we're going to approach the example. So I'll give you our 4 steps right now. First off, we're going to read the sentences and the endings, which will be our options. And we just want to familiarize ourselves with the theme, if we notice any connections, and we're going to underline keywords in both the sentences and the endings. And this will help us for step 2, which will be scanning the passage. So we're going to start with the first sentence, scan the passage for the underlined words, and then once we found an area that looks promising, that contains a few of our keywords from step 1, we're going to skim read as necessary. You might be thinking, what is the difference between scanning and skimming? And I like to explain this by thinking of a visual. If you drive, you might be familiar with driving in the evening or driving at night. It's not one of my personal favorites, But when I drive in the evening and at night, I have to be sure to use my headlights because I won't be able to see. Think of this image. We're going to basically read with our headlights and be on the lookout for any words that jump out at us, so any underlined key words that grab our attention. Once we find those words, we're going to spend some more time, read quickly around those key words. Remember, we're not reading for enjoyment here. We're reading to answer the questions. So a skim read is a quick read in order to get the general idea and to see if it fulfills our questions. So that's the main difference. Scanning is for the keywords, skimming is for the general idea of an area. So this should help us find the correct ending for the sentence half. And then also fourth, as we go along and answer our questions, we're going to eliminate options as possible. So if you remember, we cannot reuse any of the answer endings. So this will help us with strategy. Basically, once we've skimmed and we have a potential answer in mind for one of the questions, we can make a tiny X, just like this, by some of the answer options that we know will not work. This will help us narrow down our search, and it's just a little way that we can use strategy in our favor because, again, there's a lot of text in these answer options and a lot of text in these questions, and you don't want to get overwhelmed with so much information. So these little X's can really help you settle down a little bit and focus on what you need to focus on. Okay, so these are our steps 1 through 4. Now we're going to start with our step-by-step example. All right, here we are with step 1, read the sentences and the endings. So we see our sentences here from 38 to 40 and our endings from A to E. We're going to read both the statements and the endings and underline our keywords. And this is very important because the keywords will help us find the information quickly in the passage. Now, when you are taking your test or practicing, with more time and with more expertise, you'll be able to read and underline at the same time. This will save you on time and get you closer to reading the passage. Today, just to make sure that everything is clear, I will read through each sentence and each sentence ending once, and then go ahead and underline afterwards, explaining why I've chosen the certain keywords. Okay, so let's get started with number 38 right here. And it says, thinking like a successful iconoclast is demanding because it, and so here I would underline keywords thinking, successful, iconoclast, and demanding. So I would underline thinking because this will be a good keyword to look at in the passage. The passage will probably explain information about the brain or iconoclasts, and we might not be aware of what an iconoclast is yet, but we know that we'll have to understand how an iconoclast thinks. So that's why I have underlined this. Now, the idea that an iconoclast is successful is also important to us, and we'll have to look for this word successful in the passage because perhaps the passage talks about unsuccessful iconoclasts or regular iconoclasts. We don't know right now, but we do know that successful will grab our attention. Of course, iconoclast is also underlined. It's a very specific term and type of person. And demanding is another good adjective to describe thinking like a successful iconoclast. Okay, number 39. The concept of the social brain is useful to iconoclasts because it, in this case, I would underline concept because we're looking for an idea. And in the passage, if we see the word concept or idea, we can bring our attention to that area of the passage. I would also underline social brain because it's quite specific in the type of brain. And of course, iconoclasts as well, because that's the specific type of person we are looking at. All right, number 40. Iconoclasts are generally an asset because their way of thinking Again, iconoclasts. Asset is an excellent word to underline, and we'll have to look for it in the passage because we want to see how iconoclasts are assets. And then I would say thinking. Notice how I don't underline their way of, because it is implied with thinking. This is the main keyword that we want to look for in the passage. All right, now for our answer endings, A through E. I'll start with A. Requires both perceptual and social intelligence skills. Now here I want to underline the specific type of skills, and that would be perceptual and social intelligence skills. So if we are looking for skills in the passage, the fact that we've underlined perceptual and social intelligence will help us because these are specific key words in the passage. Okay, B, focuses on how groups decide on an action. In this case, I would say groups decide and action, because we're looking at groups of people, not the individual, the fact that they decide and an action. So they decide in action, not an idea, but an action. So this is also very important. Okay, C, works in many fields, both artistic and scientific. Artistic and scientific are the main keywords here because they're very specific. You might think that fields is also a good keyword, and it's not a bad keyword, but artistic and scientific are better because they're very specific. Letter D leaves one open to criticism and rejection. Here I would say criticism and rejection. These are also very important keywords. So notice how in C and D, there are two ideas. So we have artistic, scientific, criticism, and rejection. This is important that we see these two different themes in both C and D. It could be a pattern. And then our last option, E, involves understanding how organizations manage people. Here I would say organizations, manage, and people. This is the key idea from letter E. All right, so we have underlined everything. I just want to make a note of the words that we've underlined. You notice that they're not articles like the, they're not prepositions, they're not words like it or generally, and that's because those words are vague and they don't call out your attention. Additionally, you'll notice that these initial verbs are not included as keywords because these are most likely going to be different in the passage. It's more important to focus our attention on the specific adjectives and nouns instead of these initial verbs. Okay, and then lastly, if you remember from the beginning of the video, I talked a little bit about the grammar and making sure that the answer endings work with your questions or sentences. And in this case, each sentence ending makes a grammatical sense with questions 38 to 40. So for example, it, and thinking, these are all third person, requires, focuses, works, leaves, involves. And so in this case, A through E grammatically would make sense with 38 through 40. So unfortunately, we're not able to eliminate anything right now, but fortunately, for us, that makes this passage a bit more difficult. So we'll try our hand at our step-by-step guide with a difficult passage. Now, before we go to step 2, I just want to show you the key words here that we've done together. And this is everything that we just looked at. All right, now for step 2, we see all of our handy keywords have already been underlined for us, and this is great because during the exam, you should keep your keywords visible so that you know what to scan for in the text. And that is step 2. Scan the passage, and then we will skim as necessary. And like I said, we're going to start with the first sentence and scan the passage. If you remember, we have to start with the first sentence because these answers do not necessarily come in order. So it could be the case that you find the answer to number 39 in this paragraph and perhaps 38 down here. We're just not sure. Just keep this in mind. And again, once we've found an area of the text that looks promising. We're going to skim read in order to find the correct ending for the sentence half. All right, and then after that, we're going to go ahead and answer. As we scan and as we skim, I'm going to answer the questions and then make little elimination ticks like we talked about in our step-by-step guide, just to make things a bit clear for us. I'll go ahead and clear our screen, move back up to the top, and let's get to scanning. So remember, iconoclast will be something that we're looking out for, and I already see it in the beginning, so I see iconoclast here, I see the definition of iconoclast, and there's a lot of technical information. It's also quite informative, and it's not really giving me too much detail like what is included in these answer options and 38 through 40. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear and move down a bit more. Going to start up here again and just highlight some keywords as we continue downward. I'm looking at how the brain works. I'm looking at perception. And perception is similar to what we see here with perceptual, but I'm not really looking at information about iconoclasts here. Again, perception and iconoclasm, iconoclasts. Again, I see things about perception. So I don't know, perhaps here, if I were reading this, I would say, okay, this could have something about A, but I'm not quite sure that A is even a viable option for these options, but I would just make a little note, perhaps to keep it in mind. I'll clear again so that we can move downward and just get a feel for the rest of the text. Okay, again, perception. There's a lot about perception here. Fear, we didn't really talk about fear in these questions or in these answer options. Finally, I see something that makes me think about number 38, the keyword successful, and of course, iconoclasts. So the fact that I see these two words, which are in number 38, makes me want to start skimming a bit here. So I'll get my highlighter and we will skim read to get a general idea. So finally, to be successful iconoclasts, individuals must sell their ideas to other people. This is where social intelligence comes in, okay? And social intelligence was in our option A, so that's something to keep in mind. Social intelligence is the ability to understand and manage people in a business setting, okay? So we're talking about business. In the last decade, there has been an explosion of knowledge about the social brain and how the brain works when groups are also in B, coordinate decision making. I'll just go ahead and read more. Neuroscience has revealed which brain circuits are responsible for functions like understanding what people think, empathy, fairness, and social identity. These brain regions play key roles in whether people convince others of their ideas. Perception is important in social cognition too. And again, I see social. Now, that is a lot of information, and we've skimmed quickly to get the general idea. I would feel fairly confident that this contains the answer to number 38. The problem is that there are a lot of keywords. So we are talking about groups, which is in answer B. We're talking about social intelligence, which is in answer A. You might notice that social intelligence is located in A, and the sentence here, we'll start here. Finally, to be successful, iconoclasts, individuals must sell their ideas to other people. This is where social intelligence comes in. So this is an excellent clue, but it doesn't prove that A is the option. It only half proves it, I would say, because we're still looking for perceptual and perception. And that's why if you read a little bit more down here to this sentence, perception is important in social cognition too. And then we read a bit further. Understanding how perception becomes intertwined with social decision-making shows why successful iconoclasts are so rare. So the fact that successful is at the end of the paragraph and at the beginning of the paragraph, and perception is located here, shows me that successful iconoclasts have a demanding time because their thinking requires both perceptual and social intelligence skills. I would put number 38 as A. It's important to note that the answer wasn't confined to just one sentence. The answer was scattered throughout this paragraph. And that's what makes this question a bit difficult. A lot of people would maybe get confused with groups, for example, and they might choose B because they don't read far enough into the paragraph. So use skimming to your advantage, be quick, and spend time on what is included in the passage. Notice how we didn't even think about D and we didn't even think about E because it wasn't as obvious in this paragraph. So let me just clear our screen because we have a lot of highlighting here, and I will make a note of A for number 38. So it's interesting because as I was reading this paragraph here, there was information about social intelligence, and this makes me think of social brain, for example. Iconoclasts is also included in this paragraph. Just to save myself some time, I am going to look for the keywords and just verify that they're in here. And I'm talking about the keywords from number 39. Because just from skimming this, I think that perhaps the answer to 39 is located here as well, because social brain is also included right here, which is something I skimmed as we were looking for the answer to number 38. So I'm going to go ahead and just skim here again and highlight. Social intelligence is the ability to understand and manage people in a business setting. In the last decade, there has been an explosion of knowledge about the social brain and how the brain works when groups coordinate decision making. And so if I look at these keywords again, it says social brain, iconoclasts, and then down here, groups and decide. This sentence in the passage makes a lot of sense and contains the keywords that I had for number 39 and for B. And since we're talking about iconoclasts here, we're talking about groups and how they decide an action, I would say that B is an excellent choice for number 39. So I'll write B in 39. And again, let me just clear our drawings. And like I said earlier, I want to tick off our answers for process of elimination. So if I eliminate A and I eliminate B, that leaves us with 3 options for number 40. And this is helpful because instead of looking at 5 different options, we can just look at 3 and really focus our attention on what needs to get done. And I should just scroll down a little bit so that we have the rest of the passage to look at. Again, since I'm already in this general area, I'm going to continue because I see a lot of keywords about iconoclasts and I see a lot of information about these examples, which we have here in our questions and in our sentence endings. So again, I'm just going to keep on scanning. And we know that we talked about perception already, so I'm going to go to the last paragraph and underline iconoclasts. And I'm just going to skim here quickly and see that iconoclasts create new opportunities in every area from artistic expression to technology to business. And this makes me think of C already because we had artistic and scientific. Artistic, technology could be understood as scientific, and business. So this is a good clue. They supply creativity and innovation not easily accomplished by committees. Rules aren't important to them. Iconoclasts face alienation and failure, but also are a major asset to any organization. And again, we see asset as our key word. It is crucial for success in any field to understand how the iconoclastic mind works. All right, so we see that this is definitely the area for number 40. I'm fairly confident already in option C because it talks about artistic and scientific expression. D is not included here. It does talk a little bit about failure, but failure is different than criticism. E, understanding how organizations manage people, is not really in this paragraph. It does talk about an organization, but it doesn't talk about how the organizations manage people. So I would eliminate E, even though the keyword was included in the last paragraph. And I would also eliminate D just because it doesn't talk about criticism and rejection. In fact, it even says here, rules aren't important to them. So I would not think that iconoclasts would have anything to do with criticism and rejection. So in that case, that leaves C as our last option. And I'm very confident because artistic and technology and business are included in this paragraph. So I would put C as number 40. But just be aware at how the IELTS test can confuse you on purpose. This word organization was not just put here by chance. Organization is put here so that your critical thinking skills can be tested and you can really show that you understand the reading and that your comprehension is at a great level. All right, so just to review, we had thinking like a successful iconoclast is demanding because it requires both perceptual and social intelligence skills. That was found here in this paragraph. And remember, number 38 was found in the beginning here and also at the end where we were talking about perception. So this was a two-part question just to have it 100% correct. Then B, we had for number 39. So the concept of the social brain is useful to iconoclasts because it focuses on how groups decide an action. And we were talking about groups right around here when they coordinate decision making. And always be aware that decision is similar to decide. Decide is the verb, decision is the noun, and underlining groups decide still called our attention to decision. So it's very useful to focus on your keywords. And then number 40, iconoclasts are generally an asset because their way of thinking works in many fields, both artistic and scientific. We found that here in the last paragraph with artistic, technology, and business. All right, now before we go any further in our explanation, I want to clear our screen and check that we have the correct answer. Let's go down here and show our answers. And we see it is A, B, and C, not even on purpose. It was a perfect order, A, B, C. Good job. We got the correct answers. And I just want to explain a little bit here. It's very helpful that we see the sentences that led us to our answer, but it's also important to understand that the answers were in the same area, but they did not come in order. So you can almost say they came in order because you have 38, 39, and 40, but always keep in mind that this second half of the paragraph led us to number 38 as well. So don't be surprised if you have to jump around a little bit to find your answer. And don't be surprised if two sentences are needed to confirm your answer. It won't be easy in that one answer is the obvious choice. You'll definitely have to do some work and work through your different answer options. But remember, using process of elimination, especially for number 40, really helped us think through our options. Also, I just want to highlight the fact that this text was difficult. This reading was difficult. It was scientific in nature. It was very factual. And if you hadn't used your keywords, or if you hadn't done step one, approaching this text just out of the blue without any preparation would have been very difficult. Luckily, we knew that we would be talking about neuroscience and science, and it was still difficult. So just imagine not having done any of the preparation work and going straight into this passage. It would have been extremely difficult, and it would have taken a lot more time. So always rely on your first steps and your keywords. All right, let's go ahead and look at some helpful do's and don'ts, and we'll wrap up this lesson. To close our lesson, we'll just talk about some reminders and some good ideas, and also some things to avoid when looking at this question type. Of course, do read the questions first. Also read your answer options, underline your keywords, and then scan for information. Today, we saw just how useful our keywords were in guiding us to the correct part of the passage. So don't forget to do that. Do remember that your answers do not necessarily come in order. We were fortunate to have our answers all around the same area in our example, but remember, number 38 was intertwined with number 39, and they didn't exactly come in order. Remember to check the grammar of your sentence endings. Now, in difficult passages, or the majority of the passages, your grammar will make sense for the sentence endings and the answer options. But just remember to check it out, because if you can eliminate something in the beginning, it'll always be easier for you. Then do let your keywords guide your scanning and skimming. We had a lot of text today, but again, our keywords were really helpful and they served as a bit of a map for us to use when looking at our passage. And then, of course, just like we did, do eliminate your options as you go on. This might seem like a tiny little step, but making just a tiny X next to your passage can alleviate stress and it can focus your mind on what needs to be answered. If you told me that you read your entire passage first, I would be absolutely devastated because it's an example of wasting time and it doesn't even help you. So please do not read the entire passage first. Make sure that you're following our step-by-step guide. And of course, don't match up sentence endings that do not make grammatical sense. You might come across an answer option that doesn't make sense with a question, and that would be a great clue to go ahead and eliminate it as soon as you can. All right, so those are our do's and don'ts. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope you learned some new ways to approach the matching sentence endings question. There's no need to stress out about it. Just by following this step-by-step guide and using scanning and skimming to your advantage, you'll be able to tackle this question and do your best on the exam. If you'd like to practice more, please visit us at www.bestmytest.com/IELTS. Again, that's www.bestmytest.com/IELTS. Thank you, and I'll see you for the next lesson. Have a good day. Bye.